my channel. I am San D Fun, and today we're gonna be introducing you to something, the anime polls. So the thing that you're seeing right here is a discussion that I made, and this is basically a poll that I thought, why not make a poll about if Naruto didn't exist, who takes the lead role? And there is the option, and yes, as you can see, there's a long list of options, and I know. So, what do most of you think? Who's be the main protagonist if Naruto won't exist? The answer I got in discuss, most of them voted for Sasuke, and technically all of the others were ignored. Technically, and there is a good reason for that. He's the Protagonist, and Sasuke, let me just. The main reason is if he technically were the main protagonist, he should mainly be like Light Yagami or Eren Yeager from Death Note and Attack on Titans. So Sasuke is absolutely sort of like those characters, and he'll turn the anime Naruto into a seinen one. You probably know what a seinen anime is. It very much would become far more darker and would become more matured, would be sort of 18 plus. So yeah, he'll technically make the anime seinen, which makes things pretty interesting. And the darkness, the killings, everything will be more brutal. If Sasuke were the protagonist, we can see his internal struggles. It will be mostly a psychological thriller if he became the main protagonist. Thus, we don't really know if he would be the turning into the main villain or not. Because yeah, with Naruto's absence, we cannot really say anything. He could have actually turned into a villain who could have been unredeemable, or technically no one could have been able to stop him. So yeah, that's basically what Sasuke could have turned into. And he's pretty unpredictable, so we don't know. And it would have been pretty interesting to see him going with that revenge stuff. Revenge, and yes, it would have been purely his own journey. Thus, the looks. He obviously looked pretty good. And for protagonists, good looks are important in many cases. And many scenarios, he obviously gets selected for the good looks. So, he also has the factor, that mysterious guy type factor, that he possesses all those factors, which can make him a pretty interesting protagonist altogether. And especially the fact that the protagonist isn't guaranteed to be the good guy, which makes things far more interesting. And it could be far more educational, because you can understand the psychology far better if he were the protagonist. Okay, now next up we're moving on to. Okay, here's the next contender. Many of you won't even know if you hadn't really watched Naruto, and probably, yeah, Choji. Yes, he's a pretty interesting choice for a protagonist, and the reason is the underdog type. So what I mean by underdog type is, technically though, Sasuke gets the preference for the interesting part, but underdogs, let me just say, is a pretty overutilized thing in many animes. I mean, basically the characters you meet, even Naruto himself was an underdog, technically. Yeah, but yes, the fact was he had the Kurama spirit, or else he probably could have been an underdog, sort of on their level. So Choji's part is, yes, he's the underdog, comedian, eatful type, which already makes him a pretty interesting character. So yes, he could have been a pretty interesting protagonist, plus a fat guy to be a protagonist is pretty interesting to think about. For that reason, I actually put Choji into the options. So just to make things interesting in the poll, I mean, I just thought if anyone could like someone like Choji fans out there, you may want Choji to be the protagonist. But yes, when Sasuke is there in the options, probably everyone will be biased with Sasuke. It's pretty obvious. So yeah, I did actually fail to get that. But I also like the underdog characters to some. And Choji does seem to be a pretty interesting choice. I mean, if he were to become the main protagonist, and just think, if he were the one to probably stop Sasuke, just think about it. It's pretty interesting if we think by that angle. And he can probably grow far better from underdog to someone who everyone relies on, sort of like Naruto. Anyways, let's not waste our time and let's get to the next underdog then. And it's none other than Kiba. So now, why did I pick Kiba as a choice? Now, the thing that I noticed, Kiba basically was like the competitor of Naruto. He, even in the filler of the episodes we pretty much see, he always was competing with Naruto, and technically though, he was pretty underused character. He didn't got much screen time compared to the main characters, Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura. They got the most screen time because, well, obviously Sasuke had a different part, and Sai instead got in Shippuden. Sai was the replacement of Sasuke, you probably all know. So for Kiba, the case is we don't really get to see much utilization of him. Okay, fillers are different. Canonically, he isn't that much used, and he's also like the rival of Naruto. He is obviously competing with Naruto every time, but we don't really see him get even close to Naruto, at least at the present. I mean, we don't really see that. Obviously, the first battle against Naruto, well, we really saw the difference in power. He probably could have defeated Naruto that time. But later on though, we don't really even have those close battles. We don't have that. He and Shikamaru could have become a unique, pretty unique duo. And could have become a pretty interesting protagonist. So Kiba was a pretty interesting choice. Also, he's got that protagonist feel. Like, yeah, the underdog type, the one thing to be better than this guy is sort of that competitive spirit, which also makes him pretty worthy to be a protagonist. And also, there are probably haters of him too, so he could also become someone hated to someone likable. I thought there was some potential here. For that reason, I picked Kiba, because there could also be Kiba lovers out there, you know. So well, here's got his own uniqueness. For that reason, I had Kiba in the options. Okay, now I'll be talking about the next option, and that's Gaara. Okay, Gaara is obviously the Kazekage currently, and Gaara was technically a monster, and it's pretty much interesting to see Gaara as the main protagonist, because Gaara also had almost the same backstory as Naruto. The only difference being the situations and circumstances were entirely different. He was also son, just like Naruto, except he turned into a villain. That's the only difference. Though he was redeemed in Naruto itself. Yeah. But that's the interesting part, that he's technically like the opposite of Naruto. Yeah, he's like Naruto, except he turns the other way. Rather than being loved, he turned the other way, though later on he does change. And he's also one of the most likable characters all throughout Naruto, and a pretty good raid character too. And also his friendship with Naruto, unbelievable. That had blossomed pretty well. So for Gaara, it's a pretty interesting one. If Gaara were the protagonist, it would make it would also be a pretty interesting scenario altogether. Just think of it, if Naruto didn't exist and Gaara is the main protagonist, he will again see a Seinen. Same. There is very little chance that he would change. I don't even think he would change, because Naruto was the one who knocked some sense into him, and technically though, he was technically turning into a monster. He would have actually been, I think, killed by Orochimaru if he'd have just went down with his rampage. Or guess not. He could have just be living as a tool of Orochimaru. That's all I can think of. Either he could have been killed later on, or would have lived as Orochimaru's tool. But most probably the thing is, he would have been the destructive machine. And it would have been interesting that he could have had his own story about how he's going on a rampage, getting selected, except he's the protagonist. and going on a killing rampage, it would be again another Seinen. Except you will also have some mercy for his character, the misunderstood character, but yes, yet he's just going on destruction. You feel bad for him, yet he's just doing it. The destruction. And probably there could be some other ways to twist the plot, some ways that he could redeem himself and again become the Kazekage. Probably someone like Naruto has to beat him or something, and then he comes back to senses. It would be pretty interesting to see Gaara as a protagonist, potentially. Because, yeah, it does make things very interesting, if we think about it. At least, if there is some point where his mind snaps back to reality and he just thinks he had been manipulated all along, and now is on the path of redemption, it would be pretty much makes sense. And he could turn into a misunderstood journey from misunderstood monster to as it is, to a Kazekage, a respected Kazekage that is. But except it won't have Naruto. It could also have a pretty potential story if we make Gaara the protagonist. That reason I thought Gaara was also a pretty interesting choice. So I do think some people could have picked Gaara, but unfortunately Sasuke was the priority. Anyways, okay, now let's talk about the other one. And it's not then Rock Lee. And there is a reason for the pick. Yeah, Rock Lee definitely gets featured in the filler, but he doesn't really get that much role. Again, we don't really see him get that much win. He did well against Shikamaru, also with support of Gaara, but still, yeah, he did manage to defeat him. But yeah, it was also with the support of Gaara, that is. He did had pretty good roles. He had got potential, but unfortunately, we can't see much screen time of Rock Lee. He didn't really get that much screen time, which was the problem. He had potential. He could have shown the power of hard work. It could have been a pretty educational. If Rock Lee were the protagonist, technically we could have learned a lot about the harshness of the world, how he's the outcast. He could have been sort of like Asta from Black Clover. We could have understood that he's wanting to fit into ninja with taijutsu. His story could have got potential, and I mean there could be a lot of fans. I think he has fans, and it could have made Naruto pretty interesting. The anime itself. If he were the main focus, that is, he could also. You see, he was the one. He could have also been the one to have one-handedly taken down Madara. Pretty much possible because taijutsu was one of the weaknesses of Madara Uchiha. The main villain of Naruto Shippuden, or let me just say, an unexpected main villain, it was Kaguya Okitsu. Except he could have had some roles. He could have used taijutsu even in that battle with resistance to the group. So yes, he could have got a lot of potential. He had potential and he could have been used pretty well, but unfortunately we didn't really get that. Mighty guy, even though he sacrificed himself, Rock Lee could have been the one who could have taken down Madara pretty easily. Not easily, but he could have taken getting the protagonist flavor and plot armor, given that. He could have taken down Madara pretty much, just given that. For that reason I thought Rock Lee was also a pretty good choice. He also has the protagonist feeling, he has got the weirdness, he has got his own Rock Lee and his Ninja Balance series. He could have made some comedy, it could have made some darkness of the Shinobi world. He could have added the odd one who is struggling to fit into the Shinobi world. It could have made a lot of sense if Rock Lee were the main protagonist. Technically, I think you can even debate if Rock Lee could have, instead of Naruto, Rock Lee could have been the main protagonist. So yeah, Rock Lee was a pretty good choice for that reason. Alright, next is Shikamaru. Yeah, it's a long list and I'm technically dictating all of this. Alright, for Shikamaru, Mendokse. Yeah, that's a dialogue I liked. And he could have been a pretty interesting choice for a protagonist. He's the lazy guy who just is just too lazy to do stuff. And whenever he gets serious, he comes up with the plan. He's the mind. So there are many protagonists with who has got intelligence, and it would have been made more sense to have some variation of characters. I mean, the protagonists generally are the underdogs. They're the dumb. But Shikamaru isn't like that. Shikamaru, yeah, he is lazy and sort of weird. And previously, he was like, well, he's the lazy guy, and he just doesn't want to do stuff. And then suddenly, well, he's got the mind, and mind is the power. And protagonists generally don't have mind. They don't use mind at all. They are technically not intelligent, but he's the guy who uses intelligence instead of power, which just makes him pretty interesting as a protagonist choice. And I mean, we don't really get that many characters who are intelligent. We don't have that many protagonists who are intelligent and can solve problems with intelligence compared to others. We rarely see such protagonists, and even if we do see, we do have some characters like that. Just like Light Yagami himself is the intelligent guy in Death Note. So well, and that would also make him a pretty interesting choice. I mean, why not? You will like it if he's gonna become the protagonist. Quite obviously, I guess. And his special shadow technique into that. Well, he also wanted to took down Hidan, by the way. So obviously he gets the protagonist killed right away. I mean, yeah, one really take down an Akatsuki member. You gotta give credit to this guy. He had actually done it himself, and he had a lot of potential. He could have used his mind, and yes, he did. He was able to lead an entire team, which gives him the leader trope. Pretty suitable for a protagonist character, acting as a leader. So yeah, he had that, which all could make him a pretty compelling protagonist for sure. Okay, now we are jumping on to the next one, and that's Sino. And yes, the interesting part about Sino, I mean, why won't you want Sino to be the protagonist? He's pretty interesting. He's the cool guy whose name gets forgotten every time by Naruto, and he's the specialist in bugs. Creepy, right? And obviously, he had got a lot of potential to be a pretty good protagonist. And also, he's a silent guy who just you don't know what's thinking. What will he do? And technically, he's got bugs crawling around his body, which is the interesting part and the most creepy part. What do you feel? I just added him as a wild card technically. So I just want to ask if you would like Sino as a protagonist instead of Naruto. I do think that he could be a pretty interesting protagonist if he just experimented on. I mean, if he just given an option. I didn't really think much about Sino. I just wanted to sort of add him because I thought yes, he had some potential, and also he was pretty underused. And I pretty much would want to see the underused character getting the protagonist level use, or at least a lot of use. At least he could at least become the deuteragonist. It would have made at least some sense. I mean, if Kiba were the protagonist, he can act as a deuteragonist instead of Sasuke, and would have made at least given him some screen time. And finally, the way he turns into a teacher, it just shows that he technically is good for teaching, except we don't really. He's again that underused or underrated. I mean, even he's got the competition. So in Boruto, I guess you had seen a card. I mean, in a card, Sino and Rock Lee had to compete for the most underused characters in Boruto. Yes, it was a pretty funny one, but that's the exact reason why people like this need to shine a lot, and protagonist technically fits them quite well. Well, and I also would have liked to see a lot of him. He was a very interesting character on his own right. I want to add him to the protagonist list. Anyways, let's move on to the next one then. Okay, and it's none other than Yahiko. I don't think you may know, you may not know. If you know Pain, he was technically not even alive, he was dead. And he was technically the one who was showing up all the time on the screen as the leader, and he technically was meant to be the leader. Except you obviously know what happened. So for Yahiko, what I think is he sort of gave me the Naruto vibe in himself. I mean, the way we see him scatter of the trio, Yahiko, Nagato, and Conan, he actually gave the Naruto vibes pretty much the time we see him, and he was the simple-minded guy who just wanted to go for peace. He wanted peace for the war, and he was going absolutely the right path. He was in the righteous path, which made me root for him more. And technically, when I think about it, if Yahiko would have, if things would have gone just a little bit differently, I really think that Yahiko would have made things right. He would have, I mean, in his present at least, he could have just, um, he could have struggled and fell to achieve peace in the Shinobi world. And Amegakure was the village which wasn't that much known, I guess. And he was the one facing all the what can you say? It faced all the destructions. Children lost their homes and all, and from children who lost their home, he could have become their group could have become something who could have stood for peace. That would have been the most awesome thing to see in Naruto. If they were the protagonist, Naruto won't even need anything. I need to do anything. I mean, they themselves could have been the saviors, and they could have been the peacemakers. Pretty much, they could have had peace, and Jiraiya's role also would have been enhanced right away. Jiraiya's name would have been famous too as their mentor. So probably also Jiraiya would be alive, even there. So for that reason, I think that in a what if scenario, Yahiko as the protagonist could have changed things a lot well. You can think of the emotions. So much lives could have been saved if Yahiko were the main protagonist. Just think about it. And especially the heartbreaking part. You all know this. I won't say. Everything would have been done right if just Yahiko were alive. And technically, yeah, he could have just been a good replacement for Naruto. He has got that exact simple-minded leader vibe. He has got both of them together, making him a pretty good choice for a protagonist. Okay, the next one is Nagato. Okay, now, well, obviously there are Nagato rooters too. For that reason, I thought Nagato should have also been added because of his backstory. It could have been turned into a seinen anime altogether. And unfortunately, in that scenario, Yahiko had to die just like that. And Nagato could have been the pain who would just dominate everything. And with Naruto's absence, definitely there will be no one to stop him. He would be acting as the leader under Obito forever. And it would have been turned into a seinen anime altogether. And it makes a lot more, I mean, it becomes very interesting to just think about it. His mother and father are getting killed in front of him, and he wants to take vengeance. And yes, joining Yahiko and group, and then all that scenario incidents happening, and all, and then him rising as Pain, and well, doing all the stuff. It would have been pretty interesting to see Pain's journey all along. Him becoming a threat to the shinobi world, and we seeing through the lens of him. It would have been pretty interesting to see, and obviously as a seinen. Except the fact is, he probably could have been turning worse and worse. And yes, he could have added some psychological thriller and also added some darkness to it. And the other, it would have made for a more fun experience for seinen lovers at least. For that reason, Nagato was a pretty good choice. And him being from the Uzumaki clan, that's not really a factor there. The clan isn't a factor. The factor is if something interests us. That's the factor. His story would have been sort of like Sasuke. I mean, just like Sasuke, he could have been also another favorite character. He could have made things interesting just like Sasuke. Except Sasuke would have made things even more interesting compared to him, at least that's my feeling. But yes, he had also got potential for becoming our protagonist. For that reason, I put him on the list. Alright, next. Okay, it's Itachi this time. And the reason why I will actually put Itachi in the options is pretty obvious. Itachi had a pretty good backstory. I mean, compared to Sasuke, he had it even tougher than Sasuke. I mean, he was technically a guy who wanted peace, but except for the rule system of Konoha, at least for the Danzo, he had to do a lot of crimes. He had to slaughter his entire clan and stay as the villain forever. And you can understand the pain he had to go through, and also his fate was to be killed by Sasuke himself. That makes the story far more painful, and I thought he needed his own story for that reason. And for that reason, I think Itachi as a protagonist would have made some more sense even compared to Sasuke, because his story had more depth in comparison. So I think he can easily compete with Sasuke if he were to be the protagonist. The slaughterings and all stuff. I mean, you can probably see him as a Seinen angle, but later on he's able to be doing all of the stuff for the sake of good, for the sake of peace. So yes, for that reason, I just thought Itachi was a very interesting choice for a protagonist. That's why I added him to the list. You will probably know. Okay, next up. Okay, and here we have Obito Uchiha. Okay, I obviously picked his childhood picture. Alright, now for his part, you will probably know why I. Obviously, the fact that he actually resembled Naruto in a lot of ways again in the trio, which made a lot more sense for him to become the protagonist. He was a simple-minded guy, and well, he could have changed a lot of stuff if things would have gone differently, just a bit differently at least. So well, Madara was there. He could have been the one who could have changed a lot of things. He could have also been the one who could have saved things. He could have changed everything, just like the Akatsuki, as I said. He had a lot of things on his fingertips. I mean, he was one of the main reasons for the war, by the way. If only he wouldn't have been manipulated by Madara, many things could have changed. And him being the protagonist could have made a lot of sense. He could have been the one to change Kakashi's nature. Obviously, he did by his death. But slowly, just like Naruto, he could have softened his heart, and also Rin could have been saved. If only things would have gone differently. If only he were the protagonist, he could have also become the Hokage. He had also got that dream, just like Naruto. So well, just in an alternate universe, or technically the older timeline, it would have made a lot more sense for him to become the protagonist, and also seeing him fail and continue and just struggle and being the Uchiha clan, getting some dormant powers coming back up. It would have made his things far more interesting. So I just thought that Obito would have been a very good protagonist for sure. Alright now, my final pick was Kakashi, and there is a quite very good reason why. You all know why it's Kakashi. Kakashi was again from the same squad. He was obviously the cold guy who had a lot of reasons for acting that way. And so yeah, it would have made a lot more sense. And his relations with Guy, they have a very good, very entertaining duo too. So well, him being the protagonist, it would have made a pretty. I mean, he's a pretty cool guy. It's just like Sasuke. He would have turned from Sasuke to someone who is like Naruto. So yeah, his cold nature and to someone who is slowly becoming warm and slowly valuing friendship from being the lonely guy. It would have made for a very interesting story altogether, Kakashi's story. And yeah, for that reason, I just thought Kakashi would have made for a pretty interesting protagonist who could have changed things. Well, not really, except could have changed things with mentor, being the mentor of all of them. For that reason, I just thought bringing up Kakashi was better. And could have, yes, it was my last and final pick. So that's it for today. We'll see you all in the next video.